Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, episode 243. This is the Security Awareness Series. I am Chris Hadnaghi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer, the Innocent Lives Foundation, as well as the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since way back in 2009. And as always, my trusty co-host for this series is none other than our COO, Ryan McDougall. Ryan, thanks for being here today.
Yeah. Hey, Chris. Happy to be here. So as you stated, I'm the COO at Social Engineer. I'm also the co-trainer for our master's level social engineering class and our Red Team Labs offerings, which is kind of a fun class to get into. I've taught multiple other classes and done public speaking at various public and private events. I've been in information technology for almost 26 years now, and the last 10 has been primarily focused on adversary simulation and security awareness.
Every time you say it, I just don't believe it, but I know it's true. I just don't believe it. 26 years is a long time.
There's enough gray to show I've been here long enough.
And that magic beard of yours. As always, this episode is sponsored by our company, Social Engineer. So if you're looking for help in understanding how your organization can stay safe from the threats of vishing and phishing, smishing, and impersonation, then you should go check out our website, social-engineer.com. You can find out all about our managed services there and how we can help your organization fight against the threats that are just seemingly increasing each and every day. Especially vishing right now is one of the things we're really focused on because it seems to be such a huge vector. We're one of the few companies that do only human-to-human testing. We don't do any robocalls or use any call centers. We do all in-house professional social engineers that are certified and trained and do human-to-human vishing. So if you're interested in that, go check it out on our website, as well as our whole 2024 training schedule since we're in January right now. We have a practical class coming up in Washington, D.C., as well as our foundational class here in Orlando. So you can go check out the other trainings coming out, and you can join us at one of those. If you like the topic of social engineering, you should be in our Slack channel. We have over 1,500 people on there now every day talking about all aspects of SE. We even have a job board where we've had over a dozen people find employment because companies come in and say they're hiring and they look for people that are looking for work. It's a global audience in there. So if you're looking for a family-friendly legal chat about social engineering, come on in and join us there. And if you can't find the link, just hit up Ryan or I on LinkedIn or another social, and we'll get you the link to join us there. I also want to invite everyone who's listening to take a look at innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with that organization, we started that over 6.5 years ago. It's a nonprofit that helps law enforcement through our work to geolocate people who traffic children and create child abuse material. We're not a vigilante group, so we're not out there making believe we're a 13-year-old girl on Facebook or something like that. We're not chatting these predators up. We're actually finding people who've already committed crimes against children, geolocating them, and then turning their identities and their locations over to law enforcement agencies so they can be apprehended. In the last 6.5 years, we've done over 508 cases so far. So proud of the group over there. And if you want to support us, you can do that through volunteering your time, or you can donate to help our cause because we are a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. You can find out more information and even videos on how to talk to your kids or kids in your life about this difficult topic at innocentlivesfoundation.org. And if you like the music that's at the intro and outro of this podcast, it is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on the planet Earth. If you don't know who they are, shame on you, but you have to. If you heard this podcast even once, I've been talking about them for 30 years now. So they really are the best rock and roll band. And it's a little fun fact, which you might not know. 2 fun facts is, your Spotify Wrap that you get at the end of the year? I've spent 18,960 minutes listening to Clutch last year. I'm not embarrassed. Not at all. 18,960 minutes. I feel proud of that. I'm in 0.005% of all fans of Clutch on Earth. Yeah, that's how good they are. Would I tell you something that's false? No. Go listen to them. Go see a live show. You won't regret it. You'll love it. So, and say thanks to them because Neil actually is one of the people, the lead singer of Clutch, who helped me start the Innocent Lives Foundation 6.5 years ago. So it's in existence because of that awesome guy too. And last but not least, if you like the topics you're hearing on this show, give us a thumbs up and a like. And also your comments really help us to look for new guests and things that you want to hear. So we look forward to hearing what you think about this episode, which brings us to our guest that I'm really excited about today. Not only a friend of mine, but a guy that I've had a chance to get to know over the last couple of years, Robert Wood. He's the CISO for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. He leads enterprise cybersecurity, compliance, privacy, and counterintelligence functions at CMS and ensures the agency complies with secure IT requirements while encouraging innovation. Robert has over 10 years of experience in information technology, information security, and management consulting. And prior to CMS, he's built and managed several security programs to the technology sector. He was also formerly a principal consultant for Cigital, where he advised enterprises about their software security programs. He founded and led the Red Team assessment practice for Cigital, focused on holistic adversarial analysis, and helped organizations identify and manage risks from alternative perspectives. He also has a BS in information management and technology from Syracuse University. Little fun fact, Robert, my dad also has had his degrees from Syracuse University. So there's another connection I didn't know about. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming with us today, Robert.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So one of the questions we always like to start with, especially on this series, because a lot of people who listen to this are also CISOs or would like to have that as their future path. How did you get to where you are today?
I've had a kind of a long and windy journey, as you might expect. Like there is no, at least from what I understand, talking to people who are also CISOs, there is no clear linear progression to get to these roles. So like when I was at Syracuse, I actually started my studies in sports management. Interestingly enough. And so I was hell-bent on wanting to be a football coach. That was like, like all the manic obsession stuff that I pour into cybersecurity and my work today, I poured into sports and football back then. And so, I'm like networking with coaches at college and professional level and going to these workshops, and I was working with the Syracuse team on their on scouting and all this stuff, and it was like I was loving it. And at a certain point I hit this inflection point where it was like I realized that I like the lifestyle. I kept on hearing this from people that the lifestyle of coaches was just really all over the place, and you're going to be like moving your family around all the time and all this stuff. And it was like, well, I don't love that, but I've always had this love of technology, and I was a little bit of a deviant growing up, and so I ended up changing gears. I was really interested in forensics and ethical hacking stuff, just like more out of a curiosity, if anything else, and this was back around like 2008, 2008, 2009, something like that. And I basically ended up just like throwing myself all into cybersecurity stuff and landing an internship with this really tiny little firm. And I would just like obsessively consume podcasts and like I was listening to DEF CON lectures and whatnot while I was like working overnights. And I remember, I think I told you this story over drinks at one point, but I remember listening to the very first episode of this podcast, and this was one of the ones that I had listened to a lot back in the day. I was with a detective, I believe it was.
Yeah, wow, you got a great memory.
Posturing, all that, and it was just like fascinating. And so I actually had the chance to do a decent amount of social engineering, like red team work at this first internship firm. And like ever since then, I've just like when I was there doing consulting, I said yes to everything. I just like kind of sponged everything in. And I mean, I've always been a hard worker. I've always had the mindset that like, I'm going to be in a space and I'm not going to get out hustled. Like I'm definitely not going to be like, I've been able to work with a lot of really smart people and learn from them. And I've had great mentors and whatnot along the way, but it's been a lot of like calculated risk taking on certain jobs and not being willing to like back down from what I think is right. And that's kind of how I landed in this job. So like I was on my third startup, hired into this like head of security role, and the CIO at CMS at the time, who is still current CIO, but he's departing at the end of this year for IRS. But he reached out to me, and we had like a come work for me kind of recruiting conversation in his office, and he told me he wanted three things. He needed a cultural lightning rod. He needed somebody with the technical chops to be able to like basically see through vendor BS, and somebody who can think big and like actually pull together a vision for where the security team should go. And it's like, I think I could do those things. And so I went from like running a 3-person security team at a marketing tech company to running a 500-person department at a $1 trillion agency that is larger than most countries in terms of GDP. So it's a little weird.
A small jump.
But I'm here.
A small jump, a small jump in career. Yeah. In this on this series, we talk to a lot of mostly CISOs and people in that area. And one of the things I constantly hear on this show is this innate desire to learn things as they moved in their career. So I want to ask you how important, even at this stage, now you've hit it, right? You're CISO, like you said, you're running a business, you're running a company that is bigger than some countries' GDP because of who they are. How important, even at this stage, is the constant desire and need to keep learning to you and your role?
Hugely important. So I think it changes though. So like early in my career, I was learning a lot. Like I read a lot about social engineering and exploit techniques, and I'm teaching myself how to program and all of that stuff, so I can be a better pen tester, be better at looking at code, be better at like writing exploits, be better at like threat modeling software and all that kind of stuff. When I got into startups, it was I'm learning a lot about all these different compliance, and regulatory frameworks and such. And that was all really, valuable at that time. Now it's my learning. It's probably shifted from like taking the 80-20 split to I focus most of my time on like organizational change, like systems thinking, sort of mechanics or like concepts. And less time thinking about technology. I love technology, but I'm much more selective with my technology. And I tend to think about it more in this like kind of platform oriented approach. And everything sort of like stems or branches off of that. But, most of my learning is geared around like organizational psychology and that sort of thing, which it's fascinating. And in many ways it's way harder than the technical stuff because it's not deterministic. The same inputs don't always yield the same outputs.
I just wanted to kind of bridge on the differences where you have, it sounds like since you changed your focus on what you're learning at CMS versus the technical, what are some of the unique challenges that you see at CMS that you had to kind of get through for security programs, and what did you do to overcome those specific challenges?
So there's a lot, and I think some of this is unique, or some of this is like a big organization challenge, and some of it is unique to government. But there's an odd amount of risk aversion in the federal government, and that exists at what we refer to as the GTL, the government task lead. That's like the person who kind of runs a body of work, the federal person. And it exists with contractors who are reporting up to and kind of working on behalf of the GTLs. And so because of that, you end up with this kind of like frozen in place effect. So that's one big dynamic. The lack of effective HR tools in the federal manager's toolkit. So like, everyone has probably heard the I don't know if you would call it the rumors, the sayings, that it's like impossible to get fired from the government. And like, that's not entirely true, but there's a lot of truth to that line of thinking that is very hard for people to get performanced out of roles. And so what ends up happening is you have this kind of shuffling that happens with people who are in roles for a very long time. They just might not be qualified, but you can't really do anything with them. And even if you wanted to just move them to a place where they would actually be more qualified and be a value add. Like you can't just do that. And so like you have colors of money that Congress appropriates, and it's like, it gets very sticky in terms of how you can actually manage your resources. It's not just like, here's a pool of money. You either hire people, buy tools, do whatever you're going to do. Like it does not work like that. Which is hard. And so you kind of have to make do with what you've got. And then of course you have, I mean, and this is like many big enterprises, it's very heavily regulated. So you have all the challenges that come with that. Is like, how do you innovate? How do you get other people to want to innovate, or enable them to do so inside of this environment? And so like those are some of the bigger challenges in my mind, because and like those things almost serve as like a foundation for all of these other like offshoot challenges.
You said something in the beginning where the CIO came to you and he had these 3 objectives. And the first one was a cultural lightning rod, right? So now just based on what you just said with this like massive, HR, let's say, difficulty, how were you able to make such a large cultural change in an organization that big? Let's just stop there. How are you able to make a cultural change like that in an organization like that?
So I don't think that it definitely was not me alone. That's for sure. But there's a few things that I had working in my favor. So I had a really awesome deputy who has now since moved on to a new role. But I am like eternally grateful for him and all the hard work that we like did together. And he was just like, he and I were like in lockstep on like wanting to do things what we felt the right way. And so a couple of the things and I had the CIO who was like, I had all this air cover. Like, I hear so many people talking about like the reporting structure friction and all that stuff that exists between CIOs and CISOs, and how CISOs need to like go report directly to the board of directors and the holy mighty, because that's where we belong or something. And it's like, it's so over the top, but like, it's like we're neglecting this simple concept of just like managing up, managing across, like, you manage all around. And like Peter Drucker has written a lot of amazing stuff on this concept that I encourage everyone to go read and consume. But effectively, so what we ended up doing, we did a couple of like tactical or tangible things. We rolled out a set of like operating principles. These were like kind of cultural like flags in the ground that we said like these are like principles that we want to kind of live by, and we want our work to kind of be recognizable by. And those were things like disagree but commit. So it's like we can have disagreements, we encourage it, but then like once we come to an agreement, like everyone just rallies behind it. Like you don't have people just kind of wavering off in the wind, just sabotaging things. Like invent and simplify. So like, everything shouldn't always be about just like add, but we should be looking for opportunities to subtract and remove and simplify. And so we had 14 principles. I won't bore you guys with reading all of this off, but we rolled those out and then we factored those into people's performance reviews. So like we could just put them out, but like we felt like we needed to actually make it something that like what gets measured gets managed, right? And so you'll learn that I'm a Peter Drucker nerd if that wasn't clear already. But so we bake them into people's performance elements. And so like on an annual basis, or I guess biannual basis, we're having intentional performance bonus oriented discussions around these things. And those things then trickle down to the federal teams. We also put them into contracts. So that way contractors are sort of measured by the same standard. And so like we've had people removed off of contracts because they have not lived up to that. They've been abrasive. They've been rude. They've been antagonistic. They've been, sticks in the mud in terms of change, stuff like that. And so it's like you're not living up to this principle. You got to go. And so that was one thing. We also heard a lot that people felt that security was just that we were super abrasive and not accessible. We were kind of like this ivory tower, pie in the sky, just kind of like Sauron, just kind of shooting everything down that comes with it. Like we're trying to get our eyes on everything, but like disapproving of everything. And so we created, like we're both very active in our Slack spaces inside the agency. So like jumping in on very tactical things, and then we created like a monthly public Ask Me Anything. So like we promoted them on LinkedIn. So we had people outside the agency coming, joining us, asking questions. And it wasn't like other people around the agency would do these AMAs, but they would be super scripted. Like they'd have the questions would be rehearsed, the answers would be rehearsed. And
so not really an AMA.
Anything on this page.
It's really, they might take like one live question, but like, there was a lot that people would ask us all sorts of crazy, we got asked about what kind of whiskeys we liked. We got asked like how to get into security. We got asked about contract stuff, about policy and strategy and technical questions. And like, we got asked all kinds of stuff. And so it was just my deputy and I would get on for an hour and we would just riff with people for an hour. And we did it. We recorded it. We put it up on YouTube. And it was stuff like that we tried to break down the barriers that existed before. It was like do different. And it was stuff like that people just, it started to like build some momentum, get some excitement going, like made some really like good hires in key areas. And it's just, then you get the snowball effect, kind of getting more and more momentum behind you.
I love that answer. I really do. That's a really great answer. You kind of had this vision of the old team being like the IT crowd. Like you ever see that show? Like the IT crowd, like the IT people just treat everyone like they're just stupid. And then you brought in like this, you brought in humans. You made everyone seem like a human and humanized the whole department. That sounds really great.
That's a great piece of advice too.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I think what was funny about that is like, it's not like we had bad people working for us. Mm-hmm. It's that we were very much incentivizing, like, take no risks, do this kind of, like, we were incentivizing these like certain outcomes in like the strategy and the all this kind of structures that determine and influence work. And because of that, like people were acting abrasive and it's just, you got out of it exactly what you put into it, not surprisingly. And so we just basically changed what we were putting into it. And then amazingly, something way different came out. So
I know this may seem like an obvious question, but we get asked this a lot, believe it or not. How important is the changes you just said from the top, coming from the top down? How important is that in your assessment of how you accomplished the goals that you had?
I think it's pretty important because, I do believe in like bottom up approach, like bottom up driven change and all of that. I think it absolutely has a place, but like the nature of the beast is that leaders, executives have certain power over things. They control big decisions. They control budgets. They control the strategic plan. They control resource allocation. They control all this stuff. And they are the ones that are kind of performancing people. And so like if a leader's not on board with something, so a leader can want to go a certain direction. And if they're not effective or, there's other dynamics at play, like the team can still go in and they can want to go left. The team can still go right. But it's like, if the team wants to go left and the leader wants to go right, vice versa, like they are the opposite direction or opposite situation. They like the same kind of dynamic can happen. Like they can just kind of work against each other. But when the leader is when the leader is kind of setting the tone and setting the direction and really, buying into things, it creates a sort of safe space for people to kind of take risks and like let go of the old and usher in the new. And I mean, it like little things, like we were doing a lot of work that was just kind of wasteful when I first started it. And you see this all the time in security teams, like you buy a tool, doesn't really get operationalized. And so it's just kind of sitting there generating results and nobody's doing anything with it. Takes a lot of time and money and effort, and it's noise, and so like we cleaned a lot of those, and that's just like low hanging fruit, and we cleaned a lot of those things up. But there was this fear that like we can't stop doing that. We can't stop doing data loss prevention. We can't stop doing this other crazy thing like that. That's madness. Or we started it. We told some senior executive that we were going to do it. So, naturally it has to go forever. But like giving people the space to be like, we can do differently. And if something goes wrong, I'm going to take that on the chin. That's not going to be on you. Like I'm never going to hang you out to dry like that. That really helps. So I think it's tremendously important that the leader be on board and like a sort of tip of the spear for the change, or at least it doesn't have to be that way, but it definitely helps.
Have you seen needing to push that theory up? Like, so you might have that perspective where you are, and for the people below you, how much of a challenge is it for you to push that mentality up to try to get them on the same page that you're on? So that way trickles all the way down through the organization.
So like to my leadership structure, you mean?
Yeah.
I feel like it's been reasonably effective. Like I think I've been reasonably effective there, because in most cases, like executives in your leadership chain, they're trying to like solve problems. They're not necessarily jockeying for control and power and all that stuff with you. Mm-hmm. You're doing that with your peers most likely. And so if you're able to like demonstrate problem solving capability and all that, and show that you can move the ball forward and all that stuff, and you're willing to like jump in on problems, then, those people are going to turn to you. They're going to trust you. You're going to build goodwill with them. And like, if you're upfront, transparent, honest, like, all that, you have integrity, all that stuff that you'd want and expect out of, like a personal, interaction, then like you're eventually going to like rub off on them, or like you're going to have these sort of like mutual synergies start to unfold. So I think it's like you have to try to do that. And I mean, you have to also understand that like other people are trying to do the exact same thing, potentially in a different direction. And so like, you don't get to control how they do it. You're just like, you can control you and how you act. And you just have to kind of own that and like do the best that you can do, and like accept the fact that like they're not going to see everything exactly the way that you see it. And sometimes you're going to get outvoted, overruled, whatever. And like, you've got to be able to kind of deal with that and navigate it. And like, sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board and try something else. And like, that's not a bad thing. And that I think is like the root of some of these like CIO, CISO, like wine fests that you see on LinkedIn, where it's like everyone just complaining that like, we can't work with people who, aren't going to be accountable to us. And it's like, I don't know. I find that really hard to believe. So.
That's interesting. I really love the concepts, the way you bring them out, because it is, I know like we're we're probably more the size of your original company that you worked with. So we're much smaller, but we have found the same thing here that you have found even at your large organization. That if we want to see a cultural change, like Ryan and I need to be that example. We can't expect everyone down below us to make all that change, and then we're here doing whatever the heck we want, right? It has to start with us, and there has to be some level of responsibility for each person at their level, right? And like, I love what you said. It's like you could you can't force someone to do something. All you can do is just be the change you want, and hopefully people will also do that, but you can't force it.
Nope.
And threatening people is not really a great way to make a great cultural change.
No, it's really not. And I think we tend to assign way too much weight to these situations where like we do get outruled or things don't go our way. It's like let's say, some, I don't know, generative AI comes out, rewind yourself back a year, and security people are freaking out about the potential for people just like across their organizations, just adopting these tools, putting all their sensitive data into it, and just things going absolutely haywire. And like, I think it's naive of us to think that these other parts of the organization don't care about risk. But like the fact of the matter is, like, our job is cybersecurity. Other people's job is to like make the company money and to, maybe scale things or build services or build product or, whatever it is. And like, you have to balance all of these things together. Security can't and will never be the most important thing to an organization, because otherwise, like, it would cease to exist. And so,
yeah, that's a really great way of thinking of it. I think sometimes in our field, it's easy to think, but we're the most important people in the company. Without us, everything gets hacked and you're dead, right? So, that's a really nice way of kind of balancing that.
I mean, and you have to balance it. Otherwise, like, otherwise, just like the other things that make a company or a service or a product function and valuable, like those things don't work. Like they, there's the joke that security people will throw around sometimes is like, the most secure computer is the one that's like, not plugged in, not plugged into the wall or nobody uses or whatever. And it's like, well, yeah, of course. And like everything beyond that is just a function of risk and like opportunity. And so like, you use the computer or the IT resource or, whatever in more creative ways. And like, you might be taking on more risk, but the reward might justify it for your org. And like, you're there to kind of be a part of that decision-making process and help shepherd things along.
I love that. So we asked this question of every guest on this particular series, but most of us, and you already said that you had some, most of us haven't gotten to where we are without some great mentors in our life.
Yeah.
So who would you say that you would say are some of your greatest mentors that you've had in getting to where you are today?
I think the best person that comes to mind here is Jim Routh, who, are you guys familiar with the name?
I'm not.
Okay. So Jim, he and we've known each other for years now. And I first encountered him. He was running application security at JP Morgan Chase. And we had done some assessment work with them. And we did this big crazy thing that I won't get into here, but did this big crazy thing. And then I was working with two other people who were much more senior to me. I think this was like the third job or like project that I had at Cigital. And so I was still very junior in my career. I was an associate consultant, and the other two people who were way more senior, they both had stuff going on. And I was like reporting out to Jim, and it was just like, here's this like seasoned, like graybeard executive at, Fortune 100 organization. And he's just like grilling me on stuff, like, not in a mean way, but just grilling me on stuff. And it was so like nerve wracking and humbling. And like, I've stayed in touch with him since then, at like ICIT events and just on LinkedIn and all this stuff. And like, like the advice that I've gotten from him, the kind of like learning from his moves and how he's navigated things and, his posts and all that, like, it's just, he's been an absolute like invaluable resource for me. and not from a technical standpoint, which is the best. And then I've had a bunch of people who were like amazing, more like technically inclined mentors. Like this gentleman, Jason Hills and Amit Sethi, who were both at Cigital, mentors for me. So like we didn't have bosses at Cigital, we had mentors, like internal, and they were the people who were like advocating for you for bonuses and all that stuff. And they were both my mentors at different points in time. And like, I learned a tremendous amount from both of them. And it was amazing. Like I owe a huge amount of like where I am today to like my time spent with the three of those and like those three individuals.
That's great. That's really nice. And I love the stories attached to them too. Are you reading anything right now or any books that you've read? It doesn't not have to be about the topic we spoke about, but is there anything that you're reading that you're like, wow, that's a great book. I'd love to share that with people.
I've been crazy busy lately. I'm normally a voracious reader, so I'm not reading anything right this second. But one of the two things I recommend to people as much as I can, on the book front. So first is Adam Grant's Think Again, which is just like it's all about like revisiting deeply held convictions and how to do that effectively. And like, he uses a lot of stories, like he used the story of the Black Klansman and how he was able to like get KKK members to like revisit their whole life ideology. And it's like, and he's a organizational psychologist at Wharton. And like he gets into more technical academic things like the Dunning-Kruger effect and stuff like that. And it's like, it's a fascinating book. It's super eye-opening. And then the other is Steal Like an Artist, which is it's all about like taking, you've probably heard the concept, like, build on the shoulders of giants and all that. Like we don't have to reinvent the wheel with every little thing that we do. Like you can take concepts and stuff from other places in industry or other fields even, and like kind of put your own spin on it, and then like fit things together almost like Lego blocks and like build something amazing. And I feel like that's, it's just like such a good principle for like creative, like doing the creative work that we need to do to remind ourselves that like we don't have to go and like reinvent the wheel with every single thing that we do, because like there's so much, that it's a very expensive process in terms of time, money, focus, all that stuff to like build something totally from scratch or think of something totally from scratch versus like, taking a concept that like is pretty darn close to what you want that worked in another field, and like taking that, like molding it a little bit and then like bringing it into your context. And so like those two books are super eye-opening. I love
it. We have not had either of those books recommended before, so I always like when we get new recommendations because they go into our book list, and that will be great. People will love that. If people want to follow you or learn more about some of the things you said today, what's the best way for folks that are listening to reach out?
So I am fairly active on LinkedIn. My handle is Holy Cyber Batman. I'm a big Batman fan, and it was my little play on the Adam West Batman of old. And so people can reach out to me there. I also do a lot of my writing on a site with my former deputy called softsidecyber.com, where we do a lot of writing and stuff on and video and whatever on the more soft skills component of working in cybersecurity. So like negotiation and time management and critical thinking and all the basically the yin to the yang of all the technical stuff that we do in this field. So those are, as far as like public presence, that's probably like, those are probably the two best things.
I love it. Perfect. Robert, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this was really great. And when we started, I didn't know what direction we were going, but the discussion on cultural changes is a really fascinating one, and something that I'm really happy to have you as our first 2024 podcast. So this is a great topic to start the new year off. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome.
And thank you all for paying attention and listening this week or this month. Glad you can join us for another episode of the Security Awareness Series. Next month, we will be joined by the dark web goddess herself, Mary D'Angelo, talking all about dark web threat intelligence and threat actors. Until then, stay safe and secure. See ya.